Have takers, Honorable Ndiovu from Swaziland. Is it Swaziland? You're from Swaziland, yeah.
Thank you, Honorable President. First, I am Skumbuzo, Honorable Skumbuzo Aptin Ndlovu from the House of Assembly in Swaziland. I have to declare first that I am a member of this important committee on gender equality, women advancement, and youth development. I am pleased to note that as nations of SADC, we have all attained our political independence. This to me, Mr. President, is the first important step, after which we need to move to development of our countries, which calls for all citizens to contribute. My observation is that Africa has lagged behind in development because of many reasons, of which the most important one being failure to go the gender equality route. In Africa, girls were not taken seriously and were never considered as people who could move their countries and the continent forward. They were only groomed to be good wives. Their place was considered to be only in the kitchen. Those families who did not have enough to keep themselves going only sent boys to schools. Girls would remain behind because anyway they did not need education as they were going to be wives. They were kept with their mothers who knew the roles they were expected to play, that of submission. The gender disparity scales tilted against women and in favor of men in Africa. Nobody can dispute that fact. The negative effect or damage caused by this barbaric act to development of Africa cannot be calculated. We at the Gender Equality, Women Advancement, and Youth Development Committee are saying Africa should rise and move forward to full independence. Let male and female play an equal role in development. Let opportunities be equal for men and women. Let women be taken out completely from the submissive role. Want to see women being empowered to compete favorably with men in all spheres. Let the youth be guided, empowered, and groomed to be future leaders of our nations. Africa has been robbed of great leaders in women who had been confined in the kitchen. We cannot allow this to continue. They don't belong there, but everywhere, like men. We appreciate our stand to fund the gender-responsive budgeting workshops for standing committees of SADC-PF or of the committees that have just been mentioned by my chair. When we parliamentarians carry out our oversight responsibilities, we need to have gender equality in mind. Let us analyze our budgets and know if gender parity has been taken into account. As a committee, we are looking forward to the completion of phase 1 of the development of the gender equality women advancement policy. We are grateful to the international idea, that is international democracy and electoral assistance, who will be funding the validation and write-up of the policy, as you have heard from the mover of our motion. The workshops to be conducted after the aforementioned activities will empower all stakeholders to be gender sensitive. Maybe lastly, but not least, Honorable President, may I emphasize that our countries and continent need concerted effort of both sexes to move forward to industrialization and making our continent the best place to be. I thank you, Mr. President.
Very much. I now recognize Honorable Gonese from Zimbabwe. Please, you have 5 minutes, and remember to mention your name for purposes of verbatim.
Okay. Thank you very much, Honorable President. I will begin by mentioning my name, Innocent Gonese from Zimbabwe. Mr. President, this issue, I think, is very, very important, and it presents us with a challenge incumbent upon us. And I would like to endorse sentiments which have been expressed previously, that men must also play a prominent role. And when we talk about issues of gender, we are not talking about women, but we are talking about all of us. And it is important that we fight this war together side by side, so that we can achieve the goals that we've set upon ourselves as mankind. And I want to say that the committee, in my view, have really come up with a very important and practical steps to ensure that this is brought to fruition. And I think that most importantly, we must endeavor to do things in such a way that it does not remain as pie in the sky, but it actually becomes implementable and achievable. And I believe that this must permeate to our national parliaments, so that even when it comes to the budget process, all our parliaments embrace these principles which have been enunciated, so that we have gender mainstreaming and we have gender-sensitive budgeting. I also believe that when we look at ourselves as an institution in our region, we must ensure that we have policies in our countries, and more importantly, in our political parties, which will ensure that we have sufficient representation of all genders. I know that as a forum, we have done fairly well, in the sense that when you look at the people in this room, you will find that there is a fair representation. And I think that the fact that we have said that the chairperson of the Women's Caucus is a member of this forum, I think it is important. We're talking of Zimbabwe. When you look at the composition, out of the members where we have got a choice, out of the 4 of us, there's equal balance. We've got 2 men and we've got 2 women. Where we don't have a choice, fortunately for us, while the speaker, the presiding officer, is a man, but that is balanced by the fact that the chair of the Women's Caucus is necessarily a woman, which has resulted in us having that balance. However, on the issue, I know that substantively we may debate when it is properly brought before us. On the issue of the amendment of the Constitution, I remember and I recall that in Malawi, when the issue of the incorporation of the chair of the Regional Women's Parliamentary Caucus came up, there was an issue about the provision in the letter and the spirit of our Constitution to have equal representation of all the countries in the region. And I think that was the main cause for concern, resulting in the chair of the Regional Women's Parliamentary Caucus becoming an ex-officio member, so that that spirit is maintained, where we have all countries equally represented in the executive committee. And it is for that reason that that proposal may present challenges for us. I was more inclined to the view that when you look at our Constitution, Article 12, on the executive committee, I think that perhaps, I know that there will be proper ways in which these amendments can be brought up. I think what we must endeavor to do is to ensure that in that executive committee we have gender parity. And I think the challenge which might have been there in the past was relating to having half of the members being presiding officers and half being backbenchers. And in the past we had that problem where member parliaments would second, particularly where the members would have an option or a choice, those backbenchers being men. I think what we must do is perhaps to try to tighten it to such an extent that we ensure that those members which will be represented by backbenchers ensure that when they second names for appointment to the executive committee, they are compelled, where possible, to actually forward the names of females to ensure that we have this gender parity in the executive committee. Otherwise, I am in general agreement with the report.
Thank you indeed, Honourable Member. I will now recognize Zambia behind there. Zambia, please mention your name and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, for giving me this opportunity to support the motion which has been ably moved by the chairperson from Zimbabwe and seconded by Botswana. Mr. President, let me borrow the words from Honorable Gunase that this issue of gender is not about women alone, but it all concerns men. And that's why I had to put it on record that myself and the Honorable Njovu from Swaziland, we are part of this committee, and we are actually very proud to belong to this committee, because this is where you find the women with a lot of wealth of experience, and really when they articulate issues, we always get on board to support our women on this committee. Mr. President, I will be very brief in supporting this motion because it's a very straightforward motion which I think the members should actually adopt. Let me put it on record, Mr. President, that within the region, as a case in Zambia, let me actually congratulate the women on this continent by awarding His Excellency Edgar Chagwa for recognizing his role and contribution to gender equality in Zambia. I think that is a very good and step in the right direction. And also, Mr. President, as the Honorable Gunase indicated, even within the region, you can see that we are moving towards improving and reaching all the gender protocols within the region. If you look within the region, Mr. President, you find that we have 7 speakers who are women. I think that is very encouraging. Even where we are here in South Africa, the Speaker of the National Assembly of South Africa, she's a woman. So we really need, as men, to support our women who are in this very good and wealthy political positions. Mr. President, let me draw now on the issue of budgeting. As the honorable member from Botswana indicated, let us not deal with these issues as business as usual. As members of parliament within the region, we need to ensure that our line ministries, which advance and look at the issues of gender equality, are supported, and also ensure that other line ministries which also factor the issues of gender equalities are monitored by us members of parliament so that we advance the good course of these issues on gender. Mr. President, the strategies on gender equality cuts across the SADC-PF policies and practices and structures. We need, as members of Parliament, to always understand these budgets within the line ministries, and also we need to see how these budgets are presented and scrutinize them so that we advance the issues of gender in our parliaments. Mr. President, as I did indicate that I will be very brief, I want to put it straight on record that I support this motion which was ably moved, and also encourage other members of Parliament to come on board and join this committee so that we spearhead the gender issues within the region. Mr. President, I beg to support the motion.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. He's urging the whole House to support. I will recognize Honorable Mukanduri, Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe.
Thank you, Mr. President.
You have 5 minutes, and well, I'll have to limit you to 5 minutes according to the rules.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is the Honorable Dr. Samson Mukanduri from Zimbabwe. Mr. President, first of all, I would like to thank the Committee on Gender, let me see the report here, on gender equality, women advancement and youth development. I just have one area where I have some problems, Mr. President. Paragraph E of the report, it says regarding progress made towards reaching best practice on the location of youth development across SADC national parliaments and other similar mandate institutions. The committee resolved that youth development should remain with the Committee on Gender Equality and Women's Advancement. Mr. President, I'm not very comfortable, especially with the youth wing. Is this the area where caters or for the youth is problems or requirements? I thought that perhaps the youth should stand alone as a committee. This is an issue that I am posing to this August House, because yesterday we heard that women are the majority, but I still have a feeling that even the youth in the region, they could probably be the majority, surpassing either the men or the women. So I have a feeling, Mr. President, that this House should rethink and take a position, because these youth, they have to be defended. These are the people, the category of people in our society who have equal problems similar to those of women. And Mr. President, I have a strong feeling that the issue should be revisited. Of course, it is stated that this is the best practice, but I don't understand, let alone comprehend the sense to which the committee reached this point. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I now recognize Honorable Da Silva from Angola. You have the floor. 5 minutes, strictly 5 minutes.
Ok, muito obrigada, Sr. Presidente. Eu gostaria de começar por felicitar e apoiar a moção da Comissão Permanente de Igualdade de Gênero, pela forma abrangida que discutiu os assuntos e por tudo quanto falou em relação ao orçamento na perspectiva de gênero. Dizer que o orçamento da perspectiva do gênero é uma ação bastante importante para o desenvolvimento econômico, não só para as mulheres, mas também para a sociedade, pois ao analisarmos o orçamento de uma perspectiva de gênero, vemos os problemas do orçamento dentro da qualidade das mulheres, como é que se está a tratar a questão da menina, como se está a tratar a questão da pobreza, relativamente à saúde, como é que estão a tratar a situação do HIV e outras formas. Nós, se todos juntos pudermos analisar as questões direcionadas à mulher dentro do orçamento, veremos que teremos dinheiro para resolver muitos dos problemas que estão relacionados à solução dos problemas da mulher. Mas isto só é possível através de uma formação. Gostaria de aconselhar e pedir à direção da SADC se há possibilidade de se dar uma formação aos grupos nacionais para se falar mais da importância do orçamento dentro da perspectiva de gênero. E isto poderá ajudar não só o próprio Parlamento, mas também os ministros de tutela na questão de gênero. E, contudo, muito obrigada, Sr. Presidente.
Thank you indeed. I now recognize the speaker from Zimbabwe to take the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. May I join the honorable members, including the mover and seconder, who have spoken on the report or motion. First of all, I would like to put to the attention of this august House that in Africa and in SADC in particular, we should applaud ourselves that we are doing exceptionally well compared to Europe and America. America, for example, has not even produced one female president since they passed their constitution over 200 years ago. In Europe, it's only Germany that has produced Angela Merkel. And the South Americans have produced 2 presidents. But the rest of Europe and countries like Russia and China have not produced women leaders. And if you check on the statistics also, even in their parliaments, they do not match our attempts that we are achieving in Africa. So we must really say that these efforts that are being put forward by this committee are efforts that are in the right direction on matters of gender. However, I was thinking that the committee would make a recommendation such as encouraging SADC governments to establish special ministries responsible for women's affairs, to deal with issues that relate to the promotion of women in public affairs. In that way, you are assured that there is going to be a budget specifically for that ministry dealing with women's affairs. This would also apply to youth development. If there is a ministry that would carry, say, a department of the youth, if not establishing a youth ministry, which should deal with the development of our youth, that would encourage also budgetary allocations specifically for the development of our youth without any doubt at all. And the gender mainstreaming regarding the youth and the women could then also cascade to other ministries. But there must be a primary structural establishment that addresses these two groups of our society. I say this because women, in terms of population, command 52%. And when you talk about youth, 62% of our population is young. I also thought they would make some robust recommendation on the role of education. On the role of education. Gender mainstreaming can be strengthened if our education policies enhance parity between a girl child and a boy child, right from primary education to university or tertiary institutions. In that way, you are creating possibilities of leadership among women, a leadership that will influence policy, both in the public sector and in the private sector. If there are no women leaders, policy decisions, both in the private and public sector, may be stunted. The voice of women must be there in the private sector. It must be there in the public sector. So the anchor of gender mainstreaming must rest with leadership by the women themselves, and side by side, of course, with progressive men who support gender parity. Mr. President, I thought they would also recommend the issue of internal party democracy. That's where the problem is. Our political parties don't seem to measure themselves in terms of being disciples or apostles of gender mainstreaming within political parties. And the women coming to Parliament to fight for gender mainstreaming in Parliament, if the numbers are few, their voice will be less effective. But if they are more working side by side with progressive men, it is likely that their voices are going to be heard. So we need to focus on internal party democracy in our political parties. That's where the ball begins to be played. And another recommendation I thought would have come from the committee, in spite of its robust, presentation, I feel that women's rights are human rights. And therefore, the Constitution or we must recommend that they be constitutional provisions in our constitution that specifically promote women's position, women's development, and these provisions must be very emphatic, stating the fact that there should be gender parity. I'm happy to report that in Zimbabwe, our new constitution actually demands that there should be a 50-50 gender parity. Together with the constitution, there must be related legislation that will evolve from the constitutional provisions to ensure that gender mainstreaming, gender budgeting is supported at law. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you indeed. Honourable member from Seychelles, you're from Seychelles. I recognize you all. I've written down.
Thank you. I think my speaker also was next because we
so you want to give it your speaker?
Together. Thank you,
okay.
Mr. President. Yeah. I'll be very short and sweet. To start with, to commend the committee for the report. And I would just like to note, Mr. President, that I don't know if Section E covers maybe what I had missed out when I raised my hand for the submission. I note that we are talking about gender equality, women's advancement, and youth development. I don't know whether I'm wrong or maybe I have misunderstood, but very little has come out with regards to youth development. As I said, and I've also went back to Section E on page 7 and saw something. I don't know whether this covers the matter. But I think the committee should pay special attention to youth development as well. I thank you, Mr. President.
Now I recognize Honorable, Right Honorable Speaker of Seychelles.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will also be very brief. I'm a bit saddened by the fact that in this report on gender equality, there is absolutely no mention of men. You see, Mr. President, in our country, yes?
Silence, let's him. These are his views. He's expressing his views on the report.
In my country,
yes,
45% of parliamentarians, they are women. Around 80% of permanent secretaries, women. 90% of the National Assembly Secretariat, women. We have women judges, women ministers. 70% of our girls going overseas to study at university, of our students, they are women. In our country, we have what I will call a crisis of masculinity. We have problems with young males, drugs, heroin, non-performance in school, and I don't know what is the situation in South Africa, but from what I gathered, this is also a problem in many African countries. Young males not performing the way they should. And I think this issue must be addressed before the whole gender problem is reversed. I'm being serious. Maybe it's completely different on an island state. Mauritius can share its experience. Probably it will be the same. But this is the situation back home. Women, they are the pillar of our society. And we talk a lot about women, but nothing is said about men. And I think this recommendation, this report, should address this issue. You know, should address this issue and take it seriously. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. A very serious matter. Honorable Speaker from Lesotho. You have 5 minutes. Honorable Speaker, Right Honorable Speaker from Lesotho.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I wish to start first and foremost by thanking the committee for its initiatives in putting gender issues into perspective. I note that in line with its mandate, the committee is intending to oversee gender mainstreaming across SADC national parliaments in general and SADC in particular. And Mr. President, I would indeed go along with the intention to bring in member parliaments on board, because we are still struggling to make our parliaments to be gender sensitive. For instance, it is still a challenge to have women elected to chair the committees. In our parliament in this last term, when both presiding officers were men, all the portfolio committees were chaired by male colleagues. And when I challenged the status quo, I was told that women will chair other committees. And in the end, a woman was elected to chair the HIV and AIDS committee. And you could tell that the thinking is that this committee is about sick people, and women are caregivers, and that woman is very well placed to chair that committee. We still have a challenge in gender responsive budgeting. Most people are not enlightened in this area, and they think it does not have any bearing whatsoever. Instead, we are just trying to be difficult. So in this area as well, we would appreciate capacity building. Would also, as the Honorable Speaker has said from Zimbabwe, would also like our political leaders to be educated on these matters, as well as the national executive committees of the political parties, because they make very important decisions when it comes to adoption of female candidates, and also the initiatives on the policies and the quotas for the mere survival of women in the political space. The traditional leaders also need a lot of talking to about these issues, because colleagues will recall that Lesotho has long signed and ratified the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW. But this has been done with reservations. Lesotho still has reservations with regard to succession, to chieftainship, and inheritance. A girl child in Lesotho cannot ascend to chieftainship nor inherit what belongs to her parents. If there are no boys in the family, these privileges will have to go to the next of kin, such as the brother or the nephews. So really these are very important matters that this committee assists with, and they have to move fast and spread the word and commit themselves to undertaking activities in the whole region. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'll have Right Honorable Speaker from Swaziland. You have the floor, sir, and 5 minutes.
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. President. I don't want to repeat the same thing that has been said by our colleagues and members here, that the tendency of associating gender with women. But I want to say that we we applaud the perspective of gender as analyzed in this report, and we are optimistic that the mainstreaming of gender will manifest itself in all SADC-PF day-to-day matters. We rally behind the implementation of the important resolution that the chairperson of the Standing Committee on Gender Equality, Women's Advancement and Youth Development should have full voting powers. And of course, it should be implemented with immediate effect. That is my submission, Chair.
I have a list of 10 names who would like to contribute to this, but it's now 13 hours. And according to rules, we are supposed to break for lunch. I'll therefore proceed to announce that we break for lunch, but as we resolved yesterday, we agreed that we would have to come back at 2:30. And I suppose that resolution still remains, although it's subject to review, but I suppose we'll maintain that time. Is that the consensus? Yes. Therefore, I suspend proceedings for lunch break. The House meets again at 14:30 hours. Thank you.